In this week's rena-fi Mindshare interview excerpt, we ask ADHD and executive coach David Rickabaugh one fundamental and important question. How can I understand and manage my ADHD?
When I think about conceptually how adults with ADHD can thrive, right? I mean, in the end, like how might they live their best life? And so I developed this sort of little model. Most people who come to me for coaching have either not been diagnosed or newly diagnosed, or they may be in a place where they were diagnosed as a kid or when they were younger and haven't been taking meds or haven't had, their medication tuned in a long time. And so like they're often kind of like starting over in a sense with regard to ADHD. And so when I think about the progression, right, like how we might live our best lives with ADHD and really get to a point of thriving. And I think about sort of the first stage. I mean, I call it sort of laying the foundation. So it's getting the basics in place, right? It's working with your doctor or finding a doctor who's more of a specialist with ADHD to get a diagnosis, to tune medication, to try different medication, whatever that looks like, right? It's about physical self-care, sleep, diet, and exercise, which all of those contribute to, us functioning better with ADHD. I think especially sleep and exercise. There are some people who I don't necessarily embrace this approach personally, but like there are some people out there like Peter Shankman, I think, who almost exclusively rely on exercise as medication, right? But that can be really important in terms of laying the foundation. Having the support of family, friends, and maybe a professional like a coach can be really important. Dr. William Dodson writes about the importance of having a cheerleader, right? Having someone in your corner to support you, who believes you can do what you need to do, that you can survive and thrive with ADHD, who's there, really with, positive emotional and practical support. And then lastly, I think from the foundation perspective, that like developing knowledge of ADHD, right? Like whether it's taking a class, there are therapists and other coaches who offer classes about ADHD that may support you in other ways, but also provide just a really good baseline of knowledge about ADHD, reading articles, like from Attitude Magazine can be really helpful. There are a lot of great books out there, but a lot of us with ADHD have a hard time reading that kind of material. But anyway, it's really about getting the basics in place, right? And then I think about sort of the building phase, and feel free to jump in if you have any questions.
No, this is great.
I think about the building phase, and like that phase is really about, I think about it is like taking it to the next level. Like it's one thing to sort of have knowledge of ADHD, but then like, how does it show up for you, right? How does your brain work? How does it work for you, and how does it work against you, right? And I think, especially adults who get diagnosed, sort of a bit later, develop this sense of like, oh, like my challenges, my problems, my shortcomings, whatever they want to call them. I don't like thinking of them that way, but, aren't about me and my character. A lot of us sort of grow up thinking, that we're somehow deficient. Like, I remember thinking a lot about myself, like if only I was more disciplined, like was the phrase, right? And, getting to a point where it's like, oh, it's actually not me and my character, it's my neurology, right? It's my nervous system, it's my brain. So how does my brain work, and how can I work with it or trick it or like, manage it through medication or these other things sort of in the foundation phase. The second piece I think is like, changing habits and behavior, like working around, how can I do things differently that help me be more successful? I talk a lot about awareness, because with awareness gives us the ability to make different choices, right? I mean, if we become aware of how we procrastinate, how we forget things, how we don't get ourselves organized, or, even how we maybe don't regulate ourselves very emotionally, like our awareness of those things gives us the opportunity to make different choices. And it's not always, the challenge with an ADHD brain is that these choices aren't always in our control, right? They're not, or because the way our brain works against us, we have to have awareness of that. And I think also develop a sense of self-compassion, for like in those occasions when we procrastinate on something important, that we are kind to ourselves around that while still working to do better. Right. So it's about, how do we shift our habits and behavior, which can be some heavy lifting. And strategies and tools really can help with that. And that's where a coach or a therapist or somebody can be really helpful in terms of identifying possible strategies and tools that can be effective. I talked to a client the other day who said, like, he's read every self-help book that he could get his hands on, and none of them work for him. And, part of that is about his brain. And part of it is also like all the books are mostly written for neurotypical people and they don't work for us. So it's really about focusing on what works for you and your brain, not what the most recent, pop culture book about productivity says. So, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when I think about advancing, like I just talked about, sort of awareness, which is a part of mindfulness and self-compassion. This is really, I think, where we can really begin to make serious strides, because I think about like mindfulness has really, like, I think of it as like being comprised of two different muscles. And I think that's what the research shows is one is about awareness, like how might we be more aware of what's going on internally as well as externally. And developing that muscle so we are more aware of both the internal and external environment. And the second is attention. Attention, one of my professors talked about like developing the attentional muscle, because it is actually something we can develop. And then that's where mindfulness training comes in, which is a form of meditation. I really like Headspace as a tool for that. I think it's super effective. It's very approachable for people in business. It's not woo-woo or Eastern. It feels very sort of Western and mainstream and really approachable. So, we talked about, as we become more aware, we're more able to make choices. And it is sort of like that awareness muscle, like, okay, I'm observing myself instead of working on this project, drifting towards Facebook. Then, we can call into play our attentional muscle, which is like, aha, you're going towards Facebook. Instead, I'm going to use this muscle to bring me back to this project. And I'm going to use a strategy that I know of that is like, okay, brain, I just need you to pay attention to this for 5 minutes, and then we'll do something more fun. And what most often happens is we get engaged, we hyper-focus, we get the project done. So it's like, the combination of mindfulness and those strategies can really, be impactful. And then the self-compassion piece is, I think about it like, for example, in some ways, there are some days where the brain isn't going to come to the party, right? There's some times where, despite our best efforts, meds aren't working, maybe we didn't sleep well, whatever, it's gray and snowy outside. Brain just refuses. And like, we just have to be kind to ourselves. Like, okay, like, today's not a good day. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to criticize myself. I'm going to learn from this experience and make a plan for how I want to do better next time, right? The next piece around sort of advancing, I think, is really about focusing on our superpowers, right? Like, focus on our strengths. My whole, like, sort of my mantra in my ADHD practice is, lead with your superpowers and manage your challenges. And I think about that both in the context of leadership, but also in the context of superpowers first, challenges second. Because I think you even referenced earlier, like, there's a lot of good that you've experienced in your lives that is associated with ADHD. Same with these 25% of CEOs we talked about, right? There's a lot of unique qualities and gifts that we have that others don't, and lead with that, right? That's your ticket to success. And sure, also find ways to manage your challenges, but managing those challenges may not be getting good at all those things, right? I mean, so many people I work with ADHD hyper focus on the things that they struggle with and feel like they have to get better at them, which is just not a recipe for success. I mean, yeah, sure, there's some things we need to get better at. Like, I need to get better at remembering my keys when I walk out the door. Yeah, okay. But if you're a CEO and time management isn't your strength, well, hire an assistant who's good at that and who can partner with you to keep you on schedule, right? I mean, you can outsource it, you can find tools and strategies, and oftentimes you just don't need to do it, right? So there's some challenges that you actually don't need to get better at. So that's kind of my take on that. And then really the next piece is just I believe that all of these things enable you to live your best self, to lead with your best self. And I that's how I see it all coming together.